Welcome into Celtics Today. I am Will Scott. On today's show, we're going to be talking about how a Donovan Mitchell trade could affect the Boston Celtics. Even if Mitchell is not traded to Boston, and that looks pretty unlikely at this point, there could be ripple effects from any Mitchell trade. He's been in trade rumors after the Rudy Gobert trade to Minnesota because Windhorst was like, what's going on in Utah? We knew something was up. It looks like they're blowing things up in Utah over with Danny Ainge, the former president of basketball operations in Boston, is now the CEO in Utah. He is looking to potentially rebuild, which is why the team is looking to move Mitchell potentially, and it looks like he may be headed to Madison Square Garden. Here's what Shams reported late last night. The Jazz and Knicks have started discussions on a Donovan Mitchell trade. Sources tell me and T. Jones on the NBA, not Tyler Jones, at least as far as I'm concerned. New York has Utah's focus currently among interested teams. Now, this is why you subscribe, because we're going to keep you up to date on Boston Celtics news, Celtics rumors, and if Mitchell does get traded to New York, there could be other players that Utah looks to move. Danny Ainge, we know how much he loves hoarding draft picks. He's going to be looking to move some other guys as they blow things up in Utah. Now, give me a follow on Twitter, at WillScott44, for more Celtics coverage. That's the @ right there, at WillScott44. My Twitter link's going to be in the comments and the description as well. Hit me with a follow on Twitter. Here's what Brian Robb of MassLive.com said about a potential Mitchell trade to New York. The other aspect to watch of any Mitchell deal is the potential fallout for the rest of the Jazz roster. Utah will be going into straight rebuilding mode if they elect to deal away their point guard, and that probably makes any on the team available. Utah has a lot of mid-level contracts that probably don't fit in well given Boston's offseason moves. However, Boston could attempt plucking a cheaper big, Jarred Vanderbilt, from the Jazz if the team is willing to flip him for more future assets. Vanderbilt only makes $4.3 million per year and is under contract for the next 2 seasons. So we're going to see players from Utah that are linked to other teams around the league if a Mitchell trade goes down. It could go down in the next day or so. Vanderbilt, one of those guys, even though he hasn't even played a game for the Jazz. He was a part of that blockbuster deal that sent Rudy Gobert from Utah to Minnesota. Jarred Vanderbilt shipped to Utah in that deal, but he might not even play for the Jazz. Danny Ainge might look to move him. Here's what he did last season with the Timberwolves, and in terms of scoring production, that was the best season of his career. 6.9 points per game, 8.4 rebounds per game, 1.3 assists per game, 58% from the floor, a very decent big off the bench. Now, do you want to trade for Jarred Vanderbilt? Type T for trade or type P for pass. Down in the comments section, go down and let me know. It's going to be interesting to see if Vanderbilt is one of the Jazz players that gets moved. The bottom line is he's a 4. He plays the power forward position. The Celtics have Grant Williams. They have Gallinari, and they have Horford. They need more depth at the 5. They need a reliable backup center behind Robert Williams III. I don't know if Vanderbilt can be that guy. Now, we've read about, potentially playing a small ball center type of role in terms of Grant Williams maybe filling that role. So we'll see what happens. I think it makes more sense to sign a player like Hassan Whiteside or maybe trade for Derek Favors. Another player the Jazz could be moving is Jordan Clarkson, someone who we've talked about on the show, and his $13.4 million salary fits in to the Celtics' $17.1 million TPE. The trade player exception TPE obviously allows for a team to make a move without really having to worry about the salary cap consequences. Here is Jordan Clarkson's stats last season. Very, very solid. I mean, if you're talking about a shooting guard, a 2 coming off the bench, this is about is as good as you're going to do, I think, in terms of a trade at this point. 16 points per game, 2.5 assists per game, 31.8% from 3. I'd rather trade for Clarkson than Vanderbilt because I think you need a shooter off the bench more than you need another power forward at this point. I was pleasantly surprised that they weren't that they didn't trade Grant Williams in that Malcolm Brogdon deal. So they have Williams, they have Gallinari, they have Horford. I want a backup center behind Robert Williams, and I want a backup shooter that's going to come in when Marcus Smart and Malcolm Brogdon are not on the floor. Would you trade Peyton Pritchard for Jordan Clarkson? Type Y for yes or type N for no, because I think you would have to give up Pritchard to get Jordan Clarkson. So that's the pinned comment on today's video. When ad break comes, go down and let me know what you think. Would you include Pritchard for Jordan Clarkson? And it's obviously not going to be just a straight-up swap. You'd probably have to throw a pick or two in there as well. Here's what Pritch did last season. 6.2 points per game, 2 assists per game. Really solid three-point shooter, 41.2%. But when you're talking about potentially trading him, I think you do it because you have a lot of point guard depth. You drafted J.D. Davison. You traded for Malcolm Brogdon. You're pretty solid at the point guard position right now. You need another shooting guard a little bit more. I think Pritchard's a pretty solid trade asset, too, if you're talking about maybe moving him in a deal for Jordan Clarkson because, he's still pretty young, 24 years old, going into the third season of his NBA career, has shown plenty of promise as a reliable guy off the bench. And guess who drafted him? Danny Ainge, who is now running the ship over in Utah. Now, subscribe and turn on your notifications. We're having a contest here this month at Chat Sports. How many subscribers can a channel get to turn on their notifications? And if you turn on your notifications, you are going to get an alert on your phone whenever we put out a video. It's very important. Any trade could go down at this point, so you want to stay in the loop with all Celtics news. Turn on those notifications by hitting that bell down below. Let's get into this introductory press conference because earlier this week, the team introduced the newest members of the Boston Celtics, Malcolm Brogdon and Danilo Gallinari. Will break down some of the more interesting quotes that came out of that press conference. Here's what Gallinari said. When the Celtics came on the table, it was almost like a no-brainer for many reasons. I grew up with my dad since I was a little kid with my dad. Big Larry Bird fan, big Celtics fan. You walk into the facility and you see what's going on around the banners. It was an easy choice. And let's not forget that Gallinari turned down more money from the Chicago Bulls to sign with the Boston Celtics. It was reported that the Bulls offered more, but he said the Celtics, this is coming from Gallinari, the Celtics was a no-brainer because he wanted to be a part of the winning tradition in Boston. Gallo taking a pay cut to come to Boston, and just look on his Twitter, man. He's really, really excited to be in Boston, and we're excited to have him. Here's what Brad Stevens said. He was asked about Marcus Smart and the conversations he had with Marcus Smart leading up to this trade. Everybody knows what the goal is, and everybody knows that in order to achieve that we have to be deep, flexible, able to play in a lot of different ways. And every single guy that I talked to, all of those guys, Marcus included, within an hour of the trade, they're all jacked. This was good to hear because Marcus Smart, has been someone we've talked about here in terms of, him being the starting point guard going forward. They go out and trade for Malcolm Brogdon, a more dynamic scorer than Smart, but obviously Smart, one of, if not the best defensive player in the league. But he's on board with the Brogdon trade. Brogdon's on board with the sixth man role. Brad, let Malcolm Brogdon know that if you come to Boston, are you okay with embracing the six-man role? Brogdon said, yes, absolutely, and then they pulled the trigger on this trade. Here's what Brogdon said. I'm revved up. I feel like my fire's been relit coming to Boston. I'm hungry for us here in Boston this year. We know we have a chance to do something special. It's up to us to hold each other accountable and take advantage of this moment. That coming from the newest member of the Celtics, Malcolm Brogdon. Now, how excited are you about the upcoming season? Scale it 1 to 10. Of course, the C's just lost in the NBA Finals, but this team is better already. Adding Gallinari, adding Brogdon, and let me tell you something, they're not done. Brad Stevens might make a trade or sign a backup center in the near future. Thanks for watching Celtics Today. Appreciate you all tuning in. If you haven't already, go down and subscribe to the channel because you don't want to miss anything. Let me tell you, some Celtics trade rumors, Celtics news could be coming in the near future.